Hello, family. Enjoy this relaxing moment with Surly Tales. Remember to hit the like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. It means the world to us. Also, share this video with your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The midday sun blazed down on Lagos, its golden rays bouncing off the towering skyscrapers and bustling streets. Zola, a slender young woman with deep ebony skin and wide, curious eyes, stood at the edge of an imposing wrought iron gate. The intricate floral patterns on the gate hinted at the wealth of the family within, and the mansion behind it was a beacon of affluence and luxury. It was the first time Zola had been so close to such grandeur, and it left her both awed and intimidated. Clutching a small suitcase in one hand and her well-worn shoes in the other, Zola felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. This wasn't her village, where everyone knew her name and greeted her with warm smiles. This was Lagos, the city where dreams were made or shattered. She had left her family, her home, and the comfort of familiarity behind in search of a better life. And now, as she stared at the grand mansion, doubt began to creep in. "Move along, girl," a gruff voice called out, snapping her out of her thoughts. A tall, uniformed security guard stood at the gate, his expression indifferent. "You're blocking the entrance?" I'm here for the maid position," Zola stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. The guard looked her over, his gaze lingering on her threadbare dress and dusty feet. With a sigh, he opened the gate and gestured for her to enter. "Head to the main door. Madame Beatrice will handle you." Zola nodded, muttering a soft thank you as she stepped inside. The compound was a paradise. The driveway was lined with neatly trimmed hedges and vibrant flowers in every imaginable color. A fountain stood in the center, its bronze lion spouting water into a crystal-clear pool below. The sound of the fountain, mixed with the distant hum of traffic, created a surreal atmosphere that made Zola feel like she had stepped into another world. The mansion itself was a masterpiece of modern architecture. Its white walls glistened under the sun, and the tall glass windows reflected the blue sky. As Zola approached the grand marble steps leading to the front door, her heart raced. She took a deep breath, straightened her back, and reminded herself why she was here, to change her family's fortune. The heavy wooden door creaked open, and Zola was met by a stern-looking woman in her late 50s. Dressed in a perfectly pressed uniform, Madame Beatrice had an air of authority that was impossible to ignore. Her sharp eyes scanned Zola from head to toe, her lips pressed into a thin line. "You must be the new girl," Madame Beatrice said, her voice crisp and commanding. "Zola, is it?" "Yes, ma'am," Zola replied, her voice trembling slightly. Madame Beatrice stepped aside, motioning for Zola to enter. "Follow me. I don't have time to waste." Inside, the mansion was even more breathtaking than Zola had imagined. The foyer was vast, with a sweeping staircase leading to the upper floors. Chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, their crystals catching the sunlight and casting tiny rainbows on the polished marble floor. Every corner of the house was immaculate, a testament to the rigorous standards Madame Beatrice no doubt enforced. As Zola followed the older woman through the house, she was given a rapid tour. The kitchen, with its state-of-the-art appliances and granite countertops, was a hub of activity, with staff preparing meals under the watchful eye of the chef. The living room was equally impressive, with plush leather sofas, a massive flat-screen TV, and shelves lined with books and art pieces. "This is where you'll be working," Madame Beatrice said as they entered the laundry room. "Your duties will include cleaning, laundry, and assisting in the kitchen. Do your job well, and you won't have any problems with me." "Understood." "Yes, ma'am," Zola replied, nodding quickly. "Good. Now, let's get you settled in your quarters." Zola was led to a small but cozy room at the back of the mansion. It was modest, with a single bed, a wardrobe, and a small window that offered a view of the garden. To Zola, it was perfect, a safe haven in this new, unfamiliar world. After unpacking her belongings, Zola was eager to make a good impression on her first day. She joined the other staff in the kitchen, where she was introduced to her colleagues. There was Kunnel, the jovial gardener with a ready smile, Mary, the shy but kind laundry assistant, and Bimpe, a sharp-tongued maid who seemed less than pleased with Zola's arrival. As the hours passed, Zola threw herself into her work, scrubbing floors and washing dishes with a determination that didn't go unnoticed. However, not everyone was impressed. "Don't think you'll get any special treatment just because you're new," Bimpe said with a sneer as they worked side by side. "This house has its pecking order, and you're at the bottom." Zola chose to ignore the remark, focusing instead on doing her job to the best of her ability. But her resolve was tested later that evening. The staff was preparing the dining room for dinner when a heated argument broke out between two of the waitstaff over the placement of cutlery. In the chaos, an ornate vase perched precariously on the edge of the sideboard began to wobble. Zola, who was arranging napkins nearby, noticed it just in time. Without thinking, she lunged forward, catching the vase before it could shatter on the marble floor. The room fell silent, everyone staring at her in shock. "Well done," a deep voice said, breaking the tension. Zola turned to see Chief Adewale standing in the doorway, his sharp suit and commanding presence making him impossible to ignore. His piercing gaze softened as he looked at Zola, who was still clutching the vase. "What's your name?" he asked, his tone warm. "Zola, sir," she stammered, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. Chief Adewale nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "You have good instincts, Zola. Welcome to my home. I believe you'll do well here." As he left the room, the staff exchanged glances, and even Madame Beatrice's stern expression softened ever so slightly. Zola, still holding the vase, felt a flicker of pride. She had come to Lagos with nothing but hope and determination, and on her very first day, she had already made an impression. That night, as Zola lay in her small bed, she thought about Chief Adewale's words. For the first time since arriving in Lagos, she felt a sense of belonging. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to face it with courage and unwavering resolve. The morning sun filtered through the small window of Zola's room, bathing the modest space in a warm glow. She awoke to the distant hum of activity in the mansion. The house had a rhythm of its own, and though she had only spent one night within its walls, Zola could already feel the pulse of its daily life. She sat on the edge of her bed, brushing out her thick, tightly coiled hair with care. Today was a new day, and she was determined to make it count. Zola stepped into the hallway, her freshly pressed uniform making her feel a sense of pride. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked bread wafted through the air as she made her way to the kitchen. There, the staff was already busy, each person attending to their assigned tasks with precision. "Morning, Zola," Connell, the gardener, greeted her with a grin. His face was smeared with a bit of soil, a sign that he had been up long before dawn. "Ready for another day in paradise?" Zola smiled warmly. "Good morning, Connell. I'll do my best." Connell chuckled. "That's the spirit. Just don't let Madame Beatrice catch you slacking." As if summoned by her name, Madame Beatrice entered the kitchen, her sharp eyes scanning the room like a hawk. "Zola," she barked. "You're assigned to clean the library today. Do it thoroughly. Chief Adewale hates a speck of dust in his sanctuary." "Yes, ma'am," Zola replied, quickly grabbing a cleaning cart. As Zola navigated the halls, she marveled at the beauty of the mansion. Each corridor was adorned with framed photographs and African art pieces that told stories of history, culture, and wealth. The chief's success was evident in every corner of the house, but Zola couldn't help but wonder what sacrifices had been made to achieve it. The library, tucked away on the second floor, was a room unlike any other. Tall mahogany shelves lined the walls, filled with books of every genre and subject imaginable. A large desk sat near a window that overlooked the garden, and a plush leather chair completed the scene. Zola paused for a moment, awestruck. She had never seen so many books in one place. "Focus, Zola," she muttered to herself, picking up a feather duster. As she worked, her curiosity got the better of her. Her eyes scanned the titles on the shelves, and she found herself drawn to a section labeled African Entrepreneurs and Innovators. One book, in particular, caught her attention, Building a Legacy, the story of Adewale Enterprises. She carefully pulled it from the shelf, her fingers trembling slightly. The cover featured a photograph of Chief Adewale, much younger but with the same confident demeanor. Unable to resist, Zola opened the book and began to read. It detailed Chief Adewale's journey from a struggling young man in a rural village to one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Nigeria. He had built his empire through grit, determination, and a willingness to take risks. As Zola read, she felt a spark of inspiration. For the first time, she began to see the chief not just as her employer but as a symbol of what was possible with hard work and vision. Interesting, isn't it? The deep voice startled Zola, and she spun around to see Chief Adewale standing in the doorway. He was dressed casually today, a stark contrast to his usual sharp suits, but his presence was no less commanding. I was just, Zola stammered, clutching the book to her chest. The chief held up a hand, a small smile on his lips. Relax, Zola. It's good to see someone taking an interest in books. Most people don't appreciate the value of knowledge these days. Zola hesitated before replying. I've always loved books, sir. They're windows to worlds we may never see and lessons we may never learn otherwise. Chief Adewale nodded, clearly impressed. And what lessons are you learning from that one? Zola hesitated. That success requires hard work, but also a clear vision and the courage to follow it. Inspiring, sir. The chief studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. You're a curious one, Zola. Most people in your position wouldn't bother with a book like that. Where did you grow up? In Kwara State, sir. A small village, Zola replied. My family is humble, but they taught me the importance of dreaming big. Chief Adewale's smile widened. Dreaming big, huh? I like that. Keep reading, Zola. You might just surprise yourself with what you can achieve. With that, he left, leaving Zola alone with the book and a heart full of possibilities. She returned to her cleaning, but her mind was racing. The chief's words had ignited something within her, a desire to do more, to be more. Later that evening, during dinner service, Zola noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere. While the staff moved about with their usual efficiency, there was an underlying tension. Bimpe, who had made no secret of her disdain for Zola, seemed particularly irritable. You think you're special now, don't you? Bimpe hissed as they cleared the dishes. Just because the chief spoke to you in the library? Zola frowned. I don't think I'm special, Bimpe. I'm just doing my job. Bimpe muttered, her eyes narrowing. We'll see how long that lasts. Zola chose to ignore the comment, focusing instead on her tasks. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Bimpe's hostility was more than just jealousy. It felt personal. That night, Zola sat by the small window in her room, gazing at the moonlit garden. She thought about her conversation with the chief and the book she had read. For the first time since arriving at the mansion, she allowed herself to dream, not just of providing for her family, but of one day building something of her own. She reached for her tattered journal, a gift from her younger brother, and began to write. Her pen moved across the page with purpose as she jotted down her thoughts, hopes, and ideas. She didn't know how or when, but she was determined to carve out a future that went beyond scrubbing floors and washing dishes. Zola closed the journal and smiled. She was just a maid in a grand mansion, but she carried within her the seeds of something greater. Zola woke up to the familiar sound of the rooster crowing in the distance, a sound that seemed out of place in the bustling city of Lagos. She stretched, shaking off the weariness of yesterday's work, and prepared herself for the challenges of another day in Chief Adewale's grand mansion. Little did she know that today would bring trials that would test not just her resilience, but her character as well. The day began like any other. Zola joined the other staff in the kitchen, where the clatter of pots and pans mixed with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling plantains. Colonel, the jovial gardener, greeted her with his usual wide grin. Good morning, Zola. Ready to conquer another day? He asked, his eyes twinkling with mischief. Zola chuckled. I'm ready as I'll ever be, Colonel. Good, he said. Just remember, if anyone gives you trouble, come find me. I'll sort them out. Zola appreciated Colonel's friendliness. He was one of the few staff members who had welcomed her warmly. Mary, the laundry assistant, was kind but shy, while most of the others, including Bimpe, kept their distance. Bimpe, in particular, seemed to go out of her way to make Zola feel unwelcome. Growing tensions. Bimpe had always been vocal about her dislike for Zola. From the moment Zola had joined the household, Bimpe had treated her with cold disdain, making snide comments and finding fault with her work. Zola tried her best to ignore it, focusing instead on doing her job and proving her worth. But Bimpe's hostility seemed to intensify after Chief Adewale's brief conversation with Zola in the library. Whispers spread among the staff, fueled by Bimpe's insinuations. "Don't let her innocent face fool you," Bimpe said one evening as the staff gathered for a quick break. "She's just trying to get into the chief's good books. Mark my words, she'll cause trouble for all of us." Zola overheard the comment but chose to remain silent. Confronting Bimpe would only escalate the situation, and Zola didn't want to risk losing the job that meant so much to her and her family back home. Sabotage. The tension came to a head during a particularly busy morning. Chief Adewale was hosting a meeting with several important clients, and the staff was under pressure to ensure everything ran smoothly. Zola had been assigned to prepare the dining room, setting the table with the finest china and silverware. As she carefully arranged the cutlery, she noticed Bimpe lingering nearby, her expression unreadable. Zola paid her no mind and continued her work, but moments later, she heard a loud crash. Turning around, she saw a shattered plate on the floor and Bimpe standing nearby with an accusatory look on her face. "Zola," Bimpe exclaimed. "How could you be so careless? Do you know how much these plates cost?" Zola's heart sank. "I didn't do it," she said firmly. "I was setting the table. You saw me." Bimpe crossed her arms, a smug smile playing on her lips. "I saw you all right. You were distracted. You're lucky Madame Beatrice isn't here to see this." The commotion drew the attention of the other staff, and Zola felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She wanted to defend herself, but she knew it would be her word against Bimpe's. All she could do was clean up the mess and hope that the incident wouldn't reach Madame Beatrice or, worse, Chief Adewale. A ray of hope. Despite the challenges, Zola found solace in small moments of kindness. Colonel, ever the optimist, continued to encourage her. Mary, though quiet, often left little treats for Zola in the kitchen, a slice of yam or a piece of fruit. These acts of friendship reminded Zola that not everyone in the mansion was against her. One evening, after a long day of work, Zola found herself back in the library. She had finished her cleaning duties early and decided to spend a few moments reading. She selected a book on African innovators, losing herself in the stories of people who had overcome immense odds to achieve greatness. "Back in the library again, I see," a familiar voice said, startling her. Zola turned to see Chief Adewale standing in the doorway, a hint of amusement in his eyes. I'm sorry, sir," Zola stammered, quickly putting the book back on the shelf. "I was just—" "There's no need to apologize," Chief Adewale said, stepping into the room. "It's good to see someone taking an interest in learning." "What are you reading?" Zola hesitated before replying. "A book about African innovators, sir. Their stories are inspiring." The chief nodded. "They are. And they remind us that success is possible, no matter where we come from." His words resonated with Zola, and for a brief moment, she felt a connection with him. It was as if he understood her struggles, her dreams, and her desire to rise above her circumstances. The breaking point. The next day brought another challenge. Bimpe, still seething with jealousy, decided to escalate her efforts to undermine Zola. During a busy lunch service, she deliberately spilled soup on Zola's uniform, blaming her for the accident. "I told you she's clumsy," Bimpe said loudly, drawing the attention of the other staff. "She doesn't belong here." Zola clenched her fists, her patience wearing thin. But before she could respond, Madame Beatrice entered the room, her sharp gaze taking in the scene. "What's going on here?" Madame Beatrice demanded. Bimpe quickly launched into her version of events, painting Zola as incompetent. Zola, feeling a surge of frustration and hurt, decided to speak up. "Madame Beatrice," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat, "I didn't spill the soup." "Bimpe did it on purpose?" The room fell silent. Madame Beatrice studied both women for a moment before addressing Bimpe. "I'll be keeping an eye on you, Bimpe. If I find out you've been causing trouble, there will be consequences." Bimpe's face turned red with anger, but she said nothing. Zola, though shaken, felt a small sense of victory. She had stood up for herself, and for the first time, someone had believed her. A lesson in resilience. That night, Zola sat by the window in her room, gazing at the stars. The day had been exhausting, but it had also taught her an important lesson. No matter how many obstacles she faced, she would not let them break her spirit. She thought of her family back in Kwara State and the sacrifices they had made for her. She thought of her dreams and the possibilities that lay ahead. "I won't give up," she whispered to herself. "Not now. Not ever." With renewed determination, Zola closed her eyes, ready to face whatever the next day would bring. The mansion was abuzz with activity. Chief Adewale's upcoming gala had everyone on edge, from the staff polishing the silverware to the event planners finalizing every detail. The gala was not just any event, it was an annual gathering of the region's most influential figures, politicians, business magnates, and social elites. It was a night where reputations were solidified or destroyed. For Zola, it was an opportunity, though she didn't yet realize it. Zola had spent the past few weeks acclimating to the rhythm of the household. Her resilience in the face of Bimpe's antagonism had earned her quiet respect from some of the other staff. Though Madame Beatrice remained stern and unforgiving, she no longer seemed to scrutinize Zola's every move. Zola took solace in small victories, knowing that each day was a step closer to proving her worth. The gala's eve. 2 days before the gala, Zola found herself assigned to assist with the decorations. The mansion's grand ballroom was being transformed into a glittering wonderland of gold and white. Chandeliers sparkled with renewed brilliance after being meticulously cleaned, and the floral arrangements arrived in waves, their vibrant colors and intoxicating scents filling the air. As Zola arranged centerpieces under the watchful eye of an event coordinator, she couldn't help but marvel at the scale of the event. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. "You're doing a fine job," Connell said as he passed by, carrying a stack of chairs. "It's not easy to stay focused with all this chaos." Zola smiled at the compliment. "Thank you, Connell. It's overwhelming, but I'll manage." "Just remember," Connell said, lowering his voice, "big events like this can bring out the best and worst in people. Keep your head up." Zola nodded, sensing the weight behind his words. Connell had become a trusted ally, and his advice was always worth heeding. Disaster strikes. The night of the gala arrived, and the mansion gleamed like a jewel under the soft glow of the evening lights. Guests began arriving in luxury cars, their laughter and chatter filling the air as they stepped onto the red carpet leading to the front entrance. Inside, the staff worked tirelessly to ensure everything went smoothly. Zola had been assigned to oversee the kitchen's delivery of hors d'oeuvres to the guests. It was a minor role, but she performed it with her usual diligence. Everything was going smoothly until disaster struck. Halfway through the evening, the head chef stormed into the kitchen, his face pale. "The main course," he bellowed. "The fish delivery is spoiled." A wave of panic rippled through the staff. The fish was the centerpiece of the menu, and with over 100 high-profile guests expecting a luxurious meal, this was a catastrophe. "What do we do now?" one of the sous chefs asked, his voice trembling. The head chef paced the room, running his hands through his hair. "We can't serve this. We need a replacement. Fast." Zola, who had been quietly observing the chaos, stepped forward. "What about jollof rice?" she suggested. "It's simple, but it's a classic dish everyone loves. We could prepare it quickly, and it's versatile enough to complement the rest of the menu." The head chef stopped pacing, considering her words. "Jollof rice? For a gala? Are you serious?" "Yes," Zola said confidently. "If we prepare it well, with premium ingredients, it could still impress the guests. We have everything we need in the pantry." The head chef hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Fine. Let's do it. We don't have a choice." Zola's contribution. Under Zola's guidance, the kitchen sprang into action. She coordinated the preparation, ensuring the rice was cooked to perfection and infused with rich flavors. The team worked in a frenzy, chopping vegetables, searing chicken, and arranging the plates with artistic precision. By the time the first plates were sent out, the tension in the kitchen was palpable. Zola watched anxiously as the waitstaff delivered the dishes to the guests. Minutes later, the first murmurs of approval began to filter back. "The guests love it," one of the servers said, breathless. "They're asking who came up with the idea." Relief washed over the kitchen staff, and the head chef turned to Zola, a look of genuine gratitude on his face. "You saved us tonight, Zola. I'll make sure the chief hears about this." Zola felt a surge of pride but kept her emotions in check. "I just did what I could." Recognition. As the night drew to a close, Chief Adewale approached the kitchen. The room fell silent as he entered, his presence commanding attention. He looked around before his gaze settled on Zola. "I hear you were the one who suggested the jollof rice," he said, his tone even. "Yes, sir," Zola replied, her voice steady despite the fluttering in her chest. "The fish wasn't fit to serve, and we needed a quick alternative." Chief Adewale nodded, a faint smile playing on his lips. "You made a bold choice. The guests loved it. In fact, some said it was the best jollof rice they've ever had." Zola felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "Thank you, sir. I'm glad it worked out." Chief Adewale studied her for a moment before speaking again. "You're resourceful, Zola. That's a quality I value. Keep up the good work." As he left, the room buzzed with whispered conversations. Zola's colleagues looked at her with newfound respect. Even Madame Beatrice's stern expression softened slightly. A new opportunity. The next day, Zola was summoned to Chief Adewale's study. She entered the room with a mix of apprehension and curiosity, unsure of what to expect. "Have a seat," the chief said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Once she was seated, he leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "You've impressed me, Zola. Not just last night, but in the way you've conducted yourself since you arrived. You're hardworking, resourceful, and unafraid to take initiative." "Thank you, sir," Zola said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've been thinking," he continued. "You have potential, but you won't reach it as a maid. I'd like to offer you an opportunity to attend a business workshop I'm sponsoring next month. It's designed for young, aspiring entrepreneurs. I believe you could benefit from it." Zola's heart skipped a beat. "A workshop, sir? But I don't know anything about business." Chief Adewale smiled. "You don't need to. What you need is a chance to learn, and I'm offering you that chance. Think about it." Zola left the study in a daze, her mind racing. The workshop was an opportunity she had never dreamed of, and it could change the course of her life. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that she was capable of more than she had ever imagined. That night, as she sat by her window writing in her journal, Zola felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. The gala had been a turning point, not just for her role in the mansion, but for her understanding of her own potential. She closed her journal and gazed at the stars, a quiet determination shining in her eyes. "This is just the beginning," she whispered. The mansion felt different in the days following the gala. It wasn't just the accolades from Chief Adewale or the quiet approval from Madame Beatrice. It was the way Zola walked through its grand halls, her head held a little higher, her steps more confident. The kitchen staff, who once treated her as an outsider, now looked at her with respect. Even Bimpe seemed to have taken a step back, though the animosity in her eyes hadn't completely faded. For the first time since arriving in Lagos, Zola felt as though she belonged. A leap of faith. The business workshop Chief Adewale had mentioned loomed on the horizon. Zola couldn't believe she had been offered such an opportunity. She spent her evenings in the library, reading everything she could about entrepreneurship. Books on finance, leadership, and business strategy became her companions, their pages filled with knowledge that both excited and overwhelmed her. Colonel, ever the supportive friend, often found her with her nose buried in a book. "Zola," he said one evening, leaning against the library doorframe, "you're working harder than anyone I know. You deserve this chance." "Thank you, Colonel," Zola replied, smiling. "But I'm terrified. What if I fail?" Colonel chuckled. "Failure is part of the journey, my friend. The only real failure is not trying. You've already proven you have what it takes." Zola nodded, taking his words to heart. Colonel's encouragement, along with the chief's faith in her, gave her the courage to accept the opportunity. The workshop The day of the workshop arrived, and Zola found herself in an auditorium filled with young, ambitious individuals from all over Lagos. Dressed in her best outfit, a modest blouse and skirt gifted to her by Mary, she felt out of place at first. The other participants were polished and confident, many of them from wealthy families. But Zola reminded herself of the chief's words, "You don't need to know everything. You just need a chance to learn." The workshop began with lectures from successful entrepreneurs who shared their stories of triumph and failure. Zola listened intently, scribbling notes in her journal. The sessions on marketing and financial management were challenging, but Zola's natural curiosity and determination kept her engaged. During a group activity, the participants were asked to brainstorm business ideas. Zola hesitated at first, but when her turn came, she spoke about her dream of creating a cooperative that connected rural farmers with urban markets. Her idea was met with nods of approval, and one of the mentors even approached her afterward to commend her innovative thinking. By the end of the workshop, Zola felt a surge of confidence. She realized she had something valuable to contribute, even if she was starting from humble beginnings. A new vision. Returning to the mansion, Zola carried herself differently. Her time at the workshop had opened her eyes to possibilities she hadn't dared to consider before. Chief Adewale noticed the change immediately. "How was it?" he asked one afternoon, catching her in the garden. "It was incredible, sir," Zola replied, her face lighting up. "I learned so much. Thank you for giving me the chance." Chief Adewale smiled. "The real question is, what will you do with what you've learned?" Zola hesitated for a moment before answering. "I want to help people like me, people from small villages who don't have access to opportunities. I want to create something that makes a difference." The chief's smile widened. "That's a noble goal, Zola, and I believe you can achieve it. If you ever need guidance, my door is always open." Confronting the past. Not everyone in the mansion was happy with Zola's newfound confidence. Bimpe, who had watched Zola's rise with growing resentment, finally confronted her one evening. "You think you're better than us now, don't you?" Bimpe spat, cornering Zola in the kitchen. "Just because the chief gave you a little attention?" Zola met Bimpe's glare calmly. "I don't think I'm better than anyone, Bimpe. I've worked hard just like you. We all have our own paths." "Your path was handed to you," Bimpe shot back. "Some of us don't get those kinds of chances." Zola's expression softened. "Maybe not, but I believe we can create our own opportunities. That's what I'm trying to do, for myself and for others. If you ever want to talk, I'm here." Bimpe looked taken aback, her hostility wavering. She said nothing as she turned and walked away, leaving Zola alone in the kitchen. Zola sighed, hoping that one day, Bimpe would understand her intentions. Homecoming. A few weeks later, Zola received a day off to visit her family in Kwara State. Returning to her village was both heartwarming and bittersweet. The familiar dirt roads, the simple huts, and the laughter of children playing in the fields reminded her of how far she had come. Her family welcomed her with open arms. Her younger brother, Tund, clung to her side, eager to hear about life in Lagos. "Do you like it there?" he asked as they sat under a baobab tree. "I do," Zola replied, ruffling his hair. "But I miss home sometimes." Tund looked at her with wide eyes. "Do you think I can go to Lagos one day?" Zola smiled. "You can go anywhere you want, Tund. Just work hard and dream big." Her parents, too, were filled with pride. Her mother wiped away tears as Zola shared stories of her experiences. "You've made us so proud, my daughter," she said, hugging Zola tightly. "We always knew you were destined for great things." A promise for the future. Returning to Lagos, Zola felt a renewed sense of purpose. She began saving her earnings, putting aside every naira she could for the cooperative she dreamed of starting. She continued to learn from Chief Adewale, who mentored her whenever his schedule allowed. One evening, as she sat by her window writing in her journal, Zola paused to reflect on her journey. She had arrived in Lagos as a timid young woman with nothing but hope and determination. Now, she was a rising star, full of ideas and ambitions that reached far beyond the mansion's walls. Zola closed her journal and gazed at the night sky. The stars seemed to shine brighter than ever, as if encouraging her to reach for them. "This is just the beginning," she whispered. "I'll make my dreams come true, and when I do, I'll come back for those who need a helping hand." With that promise in her heart, Zola closed her eyes, ready to embrace whatever the future held. The end. If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.